The return of what was lost. Daniel Harrison stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city pulse with life 40 stories below. At 35, he had everything most people dreamed of, a tech empire worth $12 billion, properties across 3 continents, and influence that reached the highest levels of government. Yet as he sipped his morning coffee, the same emptiness that had haunted him for the past decade settled in his chest like a familiar weight. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had aged well, his dark hair now touched with silver at the temples, his jaw still sharp despite the years. But his green eyes held a distance that hadn't been there in his youth. A wall built from disappointment and betrayal that kept the world at arm's length. The intercom buzzed, breaking his thoughts. "Mr. Harrison, your 10 o'clock is here," came the voice of Tommy Rodriguez. His assistant for the past 5 years, Daniel turned away from the window, straightening his tailored suit jacket. Today's meeting was crucial for Harrison Technologies' latest venture into renewable energy. The environmental consulting firm they were partnering with came highly recommended, though Daniel had let Robert Chen handle most of the preliminary negotiations. His business partner had insisted this particular firm was exactly what they needed for their green initiative. The conference room buzzed with quiet energy as Daniel entered. Robert was already there, along with 3 members of their executive team. Across the polished oak table sat 2 people he didn't recognize, an older man with kind eyes and graying hair, and a woman whose back was turned as she organized papers from her briefcase. "Daniel, perfect timing," Robert said, rising to make introductions. "I'd like you to meet Dr. James Mitchell from Sinclair Environmental Solutions, Slaveus, and his lead researcher, Dr. Emma Sinclair." The woman turned, and Daniel's world tilted on its axis. Emma Sinclair. The name hit him like a physical blow, but it was her face that stopped his heart completely. Those same warm brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love. The same. A gentle curve of her lips that had whispered promises under starlit skies during their college years. Her auburn hair was shorter now, framing her face in a sophisticated bob, and she wore a professional navy suit instead of the flowing dresses. He remembered, but it was unmistakably her. For a moment, neither of them moved. The conference room fell silent as Emma's eyes widened in recognition, her professional composure cracking just enough to reveal the shock beneath. "Emma," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hello, Daniel," she replied, her voice steady. Despite the tremor he caught at the end of his name, Robert looked between them, confusion clear on his face. "You 2 know each other?" Daniel forced himself to move forward, extending his hand in what he hoped was a professional gesture. Emma's hand was warm in his, and for just a second, her fingers tightened around his as if she didn't want to let go. "We went to college together," Emma explained to the room, though her eyes never left Daniel's face. "Mitt, it's been a long time. 12 years, 3 months, and 16 days, Daniel thought, but didn't say. He'd stopped counting after the first 5 years, but somehow his heart had kept the tally anyway. "Well, this should make working together even easier," Dr. Mitchell said with a smile. Clearly unaware of the tension crackling between his colleague and the billionaire across the table, "Shall we begin with the presentation?" The next hour passed in a haze. Emma spoke passionately about sustainable energy solutions, her expertise evident in every word. She had always been brilliant, but watching her now, Daniel could see how. That intelligence had been refined and focused. She was no longer the idealistic college student who had dreamed of saving the world. She was an accomplished scientist who was actually doing it. Throughout the presentation, Daniel found himself studying her face, cataloging the small changes time had wrought. There were faint lines around her eyes now, laugh lines that suggested she had found happiness in the years since their devastating breakup. The thought both relieved and wounded him. When the formal meeting ended, the others began filing out, discussing implementation timelines and budget allocations. Daniel lingered, and Emma seemed to do the same, both of them drawn by the gravitational pull of their shared past. "Your company's proposal is impressive," Daniel said when they were alone. "You've accomplished everything you dreamed of." Emma's The smile was soft but guarded. Some of it. What about you, Harrison? Technologies has changed the world. You should be proud. Should be, he repeated, the words tasting bitter. Success isn't everything, as it turns out. They stood in awkward silence, 12 years of hurt and unfinished business hanging between them like a fog. Finally, Emma gathered her papers, her professional mask sliding back into place. I should go. Dr. Mitchell is waiting, and we have another meeting across town. Daniel's hand moved almost of its own accord, gently catching her wrist. Emma, wait, could we? Would you have dinner with me tonight, just to catch up as old friends? She looked down at his hand on her wrist, and he quickly released her. For a moment, he thought she would refuse, her expression cycling through emotions he couldn't quite read. I don't think that's a good idea, Daniel, she said quietly. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed. Please, he said, and was surprised by the raw need in his own voice. One dinner. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I need to understand what happened between us. I need to know why you disappeared from my life without a word. Emma's composure finally cracked, and he saw a flash of old pain in her eyes. Without a word, Daniel? I called you for months. I wrote letters. I even came to your apartment and you wouldn't see me. You made your choice very clear. Daniel stared at her, confusion replacing every other emotion. What are you talking about? You left for that research position in Costa Rica without even saying goodbye? I never got any calls or letters. The hurt in Emma's eyes deepened, now mixed with something that looked like understanding. We need to talk, she said softly. Not here? Not now? She pulled a business card from her wallet and wrote something on the back. This is my personal number. If you really want answers, call me tomorrow. She left him standing in the conference room, holding the card like a lifeline. On the back, in her familiar handwriting, were 10 digits and a small message. Some bridges aren't as burned as we thought. That evening, Daniel found himself unable to concentrate on anything. He'd canceled his dinner plans and sent Tommy home early, preferring the solitude of his penthouse to the company of others. But the silence only amplified the chaos in his mind. Seeing Emma again had awakened something he'd buried deep, the memory of who he used to be. Before the breakup that had shattered his ability to trust, before he'd built an empire as armor. Against emotional vulnerability, he had been a different man. A man who believed in love and partnership and building a life with someone who understood his dreams. Emma had been his everything during those college years. They'd met in an advanced physics class, two brilliant minds drawn together by shared passion for innovation and change. Their love affair had been intense and all-consuming. The kind of connection that only happened once in a lifetime. They'd planned a future together. After graduation, they would start their own company. Combining his technological innovations with her environmental science background, they would change the world and build a family, dreams intertwining like their fingers during those long walks across campus. Then, seemingly overnight, it had all fallen apart. Emma had accepted a research position in Costa Rica without discussing it with him. When he'd gone to her apartment to demand an explanation, her roommate had said she'd already left. His calls went unanswered. His emails bounced back. It was as if she had simply erased him from her existence. The betrayal had nearly broken him. For months he'd waited, hoping she would contact him, explain, come back. When she didn't, something essential in him had withered and died. He'd thrown himself into building Harrison Technologies with a single-minded determination that left no room for emotional connections. Every relationship since had been carefully controlled, surfacely vowel, designed to end before it could hurt him again. But now Emma claimed she had tried to reach him. She'd come to his apartment, called written letters. None of it made sense. Unless ... Daniel's blood chilled as a terrible possibility occurred to him. He walked to his home office and pulled out an old box from the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside were mementos from his college years, things he couldn't bring himself to throw away despite the pain they caused. At the bottom of the box was a letter yellowed with age that he'd never opened. It had arrived 6 months after Emma left, forwarded from his old address. He'd recognized her handwriting immediately and, in his hurt and anger, had thrown it in the box without reading it, assuming it was some cruel goodbye or worse, news. of her engagement to someone else. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope now. 12 years too late. "My dearest Daniel," it began, and his heart clenched at the familiar endearment. "I don't know why you won't see me or return my calls, but I have to believe you'll read this eventually. I need you to know the truth about why I left." The letter went on to explain that her father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer while she was finishing her senior year. Her family had begged her to come home to Costa Rica to spend his final months with him. She'd tried to tell Daniel in person, but he'd been in the middle of important interviews with potential investors for their startup idea and had asked her to wait until later. Later never came. Her father had taken a sudden turn for the worse, and she'd had to leave immediately. To catch the last flight that would get her home in time, she'd left messages with his roommate, tried calling from the airport, sent emails explaining everything. "I loved you too much to abandon my father in his final days," the letter continued, "but I never intended to abandon you. I thought you understood. I thought you would wait for me as I would have waited for you. When you stopped responding to my messages, I realized I'd been wrong about what we meant to each other. I hope someday you can forgive me for choosing family over love, even though it broke my heart to leave you." Daniel's hands shook as he finished reading. At the bottom of the letter was a phone number and an address in Costa Rica, along with a final message. "I'll wait for you for as long as I can, but I won't wait forever. If you change your mind, if what we had was real, you know where to find me." Letter falling from nerveless fingers. 12 years, fingers. 12 years. Of believing Emma had abandoned him, and the truth was that he had abandoned her. His roommate at the time, Kevin Walsh, had been notoriously unreliable, often forgetting to pass along messages when he was focused on his own romantic dramas. Daniel had been so consumed with preparing for investor meetings that he hadn't noticed. Emma's growing distraction hadn't pressed her to explain what was troubling her, and when she'd vanished from his life, his pride and hurt had made him refuse to chase after her. Convinced that if she truly loved him, she would have found a way to explain. He'd been a fool, and that foolishness had cost him the love of his life. Now she was back, and he had a chance to make things right. The question was whether 12 years of separate lives had changed them too much. Whether the connection they'd once shared could be rebuilt from the ashes of old misunderstandings. Daniel picked up his phone and stared at Emma's business card. Tomorrow felt like a lifetime away, but he would wait. After all, he'd already waited 12 years. One more day wouldn't kill him, though the anticipation might. Outside his windows, New York glittered in the darkness, full of possibilities and second chances. For the first time in over a decade, Daniel Harrison allowed himself to hope that love might not be as lost as he'd believed. Some bridges, as Emma had written, weren't as burned as they thought. The morning couldn't come soon enough. The call. That changed everything. Daniel stared at his phone for the 100th time that morning, Emma's business card worn soft from his fingers. The sun streamed through his penthouse windows, but he barely noticed the golden light painting his office. Walls. Every minute that passed felt like an hour. Every hour like a day. At exactly 9 o'clock, he dialed her number. "Hello." Emma's voice was cautious, as if she'd been expecting his call but wasn't sure she wanted to answer. "It's Daniel. I read your letter." Silence stretched between them, filled with 12 years of misunderstanding and pain. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Which letter?" "The one I was too proud and too hurt to open 12 years ago? The one that explained about your father?" Daniel closed his eyes, shame washing over him like a tide. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I never got your messages. Kevin never told me you called, and I was so buried in investor meetings that I didn't notice. Something was wrong. When you disappeared, I thought you'd chosen your career over us." A soft sob escaped from Emma's end of the line. "He died 3 days after I got home." 3 days, Daniel. If I hadn't left when I did, I would have missed. Saying goodbye to the man who raised me, who taught me to believe in science and wonder and the possibility of making the world better. "I should have been there with you," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "I should have supported you, helped you through it. Instead, I let my pride destroy the best thing that ever happened to me." "We were young," Emma said softly. "Both made mistakes. The question is, what do we do now?" Daniel stood up, pacing to his window. "Have dinner with me tonight. Please, let me try to make up for 12 years of being an idiot. He heard her laugh, and the sound sent warmth flooding through his chest. It was the same laugh he remembered, bright and musical and full of life. Okay, she said, but somewhere quiet. We have a lot to talk about, and I don't want an audience. Cook, Daniel offered without thinking. I mean, if you're comfortable coming to my place, I've gotten better at it over the years. You, cook. Emma's amusement was clear in her voice. The man who once burned water, attempting to make pasta? I've had 12 years to practice, Daniel said, smiling despite himself. Though I make no promises about the quality, I'll risk it. Text me your address. After hanging up, Daniel felt lighter than he had in years. For the first time, the future seemed to hold possibilities beyond quarterly reports and board meetings. But as the day wore on, nervous energy began to replace his initial euphoria. What if they'd changed too much? What if the connection they'd once shared was just a memory, impossible to recapture? By evening, Daniel's penthouse was transformed. Candles flickered on every surface, soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and the smell of his carefully prepared dinner filled the air. He'd spent the afternoon cooking Emma's favorite meal from college, a chicken marsala with wild mushrooms, hoping muscle memory and nostalgia might bridge the gap between who they'd been and who they were now. The doorbell rang at exactly 7, and Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs as he opened the door. Emma stood in the hallway wearing a simple black dress and a nervous smile, looking beautiful and familiar and heartbreakingly real. Hi, she said softly. Hi yourself. Daniel stepped aside to let her in, catching the subtle scent of her perfume. As she passed, different from what she'd worn in college, more sophisticated, but it suited the woman she'd become. Emma moved through his living space with curious eyes, taking in the modern artwork and expensive furniture. It's beautiful, she said. Very you, but grown up. I had help from a designer, Daniel admitted. Left to my own devices, it would probably still look like a college dorm room. They settled into an easy rhythm as Daniel finished preparing dinner and Emma poured wine. The conversation flowed naturally at first, covering safe topics, their careers, mutual friends from college, the changes in their respective cities. But underneath the surface pleasantries, Daniel could feel the current of unfinished business, pulling them toward deeper waters. Over dinner, Emma told him about her work in environmental science, her eyes lighting up as she described her latest project studying the effects of climate change on ocean ecosystems. Daniel found himself captivated not just by her passion, by the way she'd grown into her brilliance, confident and accomplished in a way that made his chest tighten with pride and regret for all the years he'd missed watching her bloom. What about you? Emma asked, as they moved to the couch with their wine. $12 billion later, are you happy? The question caught Daniel off guard with its directness. He stared into his wine glass, considering how to answer honestly. Successful. Yes. Happy, he shrugged. I thought I was for a while. Building the company gave me purpose, something to pour all my energy into. But lately, especially after seeing you again, I've realized that success without someone to share it with feels pretty hollow. Emma's expression grew thoughtful. I've been wondering about that. No wife? No family? Tommy mentioned you've never been married? You've been asking about me? Daniel couldn't hide his surprise or the small flutter of hope in his chest. Emma blushed slightly, professional curiosity. I wanted to know who I was dealing with in this partnership. Liar, Daniel said gently, smiling at her embarrassment. But to answer your question, no. No wife, no family. I tried dating over the years, but nothing ever stuck. I think I was comparing everyone to a memory that no one could live up to. Admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Emma set down her wine glass and turned to face him fully. Daniel, I need you to know something. I tried to move on too. I was even engaged once, about 5 years ago. A fellow scientist named David. He was kind, intelligent, everything I thought I should want. But when it came time to walk down the aisle, I couldn't do it. I realized I was trying to marry him because he was safe, not because I loved him the way I loved you. Daniel's heart clenched at her use of the past tense, but he forced himself not to read too much into it. What happened? Called off the wedding 2 weeks before the ceremony. It wasn't fair to either of us. David deserved someone who could love him completely, and I deserved to stop settling for less than what I'd once had. She paused, meeting his eyes. What we had, Daniel. It was real, wasn't it? Didn't just imagine the connection we shared. It was the most real thing in my life, Daniel said without hesitation. Ma, I've spent 12 years trying to forget you, and I never came close. You were always there in every important decision, every quiet moment, every time I achieved something. I wanted to share with someone who would truly understand. Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. So what now? Do we try to pick up where we left off? Pretend 12 years didn't happen? I don't know, Daniel admitted. I know I want to try if you do. But we're different people now. We'd have to figure out who we are together as adults, not just who we were as kids in love. Before Emma could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously with emergency alerts. Daniel frowned, pulling out his device to see a news notification. That made his blood run cold. Breaking. Unexplained energy readings detected worldwide. Government officials refuse comment. Emma was staring at her own phone with an expression of shock and something that looked almost like fear. I have to go, she said suddenly, standing and reaching for her purse. I'm sorry, Daniel, but this is important. My team needs me. Wait, Daniel said, rising to follow her. What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost? She paused at his door, her hand on the handle, and for a moment he thought she might confide in him. Instead, she stood on her tiptoes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. Thank you for dinner, for the explanation, for giving us a chance to clear the air. Her voice was thick with emotion. But there are some things about my work that I can't share, even with you. Not yet. When will I see you again? Daniel called, as she stepped into the hallway. Soon, I hope. But Daniel, she turned back to face him one last time. Whatever happens in the next few days, whatever you hear about my research or my team, please remember that not everything is what it seems. Remember that what we talked about tonight, what we felt tonight, that's real. Hold on to that. Before he could ask what she meant, Emma was gone, leaving Daniel standing in his doorway with more questions than answers and the lingering scent of her perfume. As his only proof that the evening had happened at all, the truth revealed 3 days passed without word from Emma. Daniel threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the growing knot of worry in his stomach. But even his most demanding projects couldn't keep his mind from wandering to her cryptic goodbye and the fear he'd seen in her eyes. The world news had grown increasingly strange. Reports of unusual energy signatures, unexplained atmospheric disturbances, and government facilities going into lockdown dominated every channel. Official statements were vague and contradictory, but rumors spread like wildfire across social media. Everything from solar flares to terrorist attacks to classified military experiments gone wrong. On Thursday morning, Daniel's private phone rang. Emma's number? Thank God, he breathed, answering immediately. Emma, are you okay? I've been worried sick. Daniel, I need to see you. Can you meet me at the Natural History Museum? The planetarium, specifically. And Daniel. Her voice was strained. Urgent. Come alone, and don't tell anyone where you're going. Not even Robert. An hour later, Daniel found Emma sitting in the darkened planetarium. Her figure silhouetted against the swirling cosmos projected on the dome above. She looked exhausted, her usually perfect composure replaced by something that looked remarkably like fear. What's going on? Daniel asked, sliding into the seat beside her. Emma, you're scaring me. Watching for a long moment, watching. The artificial stars wheel overhead. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about the world. About my work. About why I really came back to New York. She turned to face him, and in the dim light, he could see tears tracking down her cheeks. 3 years ago, my research team made first contact. Daniel's world tilted. First contact with what? Not what? Who? Emma's hands trembled as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small device that looked like nothing Daniel had ever seen, its surface shifting between colors like liquid metal. There's an entire civilization living in our oceans, Daniel. They've been here for centuries, maybe longer, watching us, studying us, trying to decide whether humanity can be trusted. Emma, that's impossible. If there were aliens on Earth, we would know. The government would know. The government does know. At least some parts of it do. There's a classified project completely off the books that's been monitoring the situation. For decades, Dr. Mitchell isn't just my research supervisor, Daniel. He's the head of the most important scientific endeavor in human history. Daniel stared at the device in Emma's hands, his logical mind struggling to process what she was telling him. You're serious. You're completely serious. They call themselves the Aquarians. They're not from another planet. They evolved here, in the deep ocean trenches, millions of years before humans developed civilization. They're incredibly advanced, both technologically and socially. No war, no poverty, no environmental destruction. They've been watching us make a mess of the surface world for centuries, debating whether we're worth saving or if we're too dangerous to be allowed to continue. The device in Emma's hands pulsed with soft light, and suddenly, a holographic image appeared between them, a being that was unmistakably intelligent but utterly alien. Tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like scales and large dark eyes that held depths of wisdom and sorrow. "This is Zara," Emma said softly. "She's a scientist like us. She's been living among humans for the past 5 years, studying our culture, our potential for growth and change. She's been working with my team under the cover of a postdoctoral fellowship from Brazil." "The woman with the accent who sometimes joins your video conferences?" Daniel said, pieces clicking into place. "I thought there was something different about her, but I assumed it was just cultural differences." Emma nodded. "Zara has been our primary liaison with the Aquarian Council. She's been arguing for humanity, insisting that we have the potential to evolve beyond our destructive tendencies. But recent events have made that argument much harder to support." "What recent events?" Emma's expression grew grave. "The energy readings everyone's been talking about aren't natural phenomena or government experiments. They're weapons tests. A faction of the Aquarian Council has decided that humanity is too dangerous to be allowed to continue unchecked. Been preparing for what they call intervention." Daniel felt sick. Intervention meaning what? Complete technological shutdown. Every electronic device on Earth rendered useless. No communication, no power grids, no medical equipment, no transportation. Systems. They believe that if humanity is forced back to a pre-industrial state, we'll either learn to live in harmony with the planet or we'll destroy ourselves, solving their problem either way. The implications hit Daniel like a physical blow. Billions of people dependent on modern infrastructure would die within weeks if all technology suddenly failed. Hospitals, food distribution, water treatment, transportation, communication. Civilization would collapse overnight. "When?" I asked. "The council meets tomorrow to make a final decision. Zara and a few others are still fighting for us, but they need proof that humanity is capable of change, of working together for something greater than individual gain." "What kind of proof?" Emma took his hands in hers, the alien device pulsing softly between their joined palms. "They want to meet with human representatives. Not government officials or military leaders, but people who represent humanity's potential. Scientists, innovators, leaders who've shown they can think beyond profit and power. And you want me to be one of them, you and a handful of others. Robert, Dr. Mitchell, a few others from around the world who've demonstrated real commitment to making the world better. Zara believes that if the council can see humanity through our eyes, understand our capacity for love and sacrifice and growth, they might give us more time." Daniel stared at the hologram still floating between them, at Zara's alien but somehow familiar expression of hope and sadness. Everything he thought he knew about reality had just been shattered, but strangely, his first thought wasn't about the cosmic implications or the threat to humanity. His first thought was about Emma, how she'd carried this impossible burden alone for 3 years. How she'd come back into his life not just for personal reasons, but because she needed his help to save the world. "How long do we have?" he asked. "The meeting is tonight. Zara will transport us to the Aquarian City. It's about 3 miles down in the Puerto Rico Trench. Inside an air-filled chamber they've constructed specifically for human visitors. Transport us how? Emma smiled for the first time since he'd found her in the planetarium, you'll see. But Daniel, I need you to know that this is dangerous. It's not the trip itself. Aquarian technology is incredibly safe. But what we're asking could be seen as treason by some government factions. If this goes wrong, we might not be coming home. Daniel looked at Emma, really looked at her, seeing not just the woman he'd once loved, but the scientist who'd spent years building bridges between species, the person who'd risked everything to give humanity a chance at survival. 12 years ago, I let fear and pride cost me the most important thing in my life, he said quietly. Won't make that mistake again. If you believe this is our only chance, then I'm with you. Whatever happens. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Again, but this time, they were tears of relief and gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. I couldn't do this without you. As they left the planetarium together, Daniel's mind raced with questions and implications, but underneath it all was a strange sense of rightness. This was why Emma had come back into his life, not just to resolve their personal history, but to give him the chance to be part of something larger than himself, to help determine the future of humanity alongside the woman he'd never stopped loving. The stars wheeling overhead in the New York sky suddenly seemed less distant, less empty. Somewhere beneath the waves, an ancient civilization was deciding humanity's fate. And somehow, impossibly, Daniel Harrison was going to have a voice in that decision. The real adventure was just beginning. Descent into wonder. The yacht looked ordinary enough from the outside, a sleek vessel moored at a private dock in the Hamptons. But as Emma led Daniel aboard, he noticed details that seemed subtly wrong. The hull moved through the water with impossible smoothness. The engines made no sound, and the navigation equipment displayed readings that didn't match any technology. He recognized Aquarian modifications, Emma explained, seeing his confusion. Zara's been slowly introducing their tech into our world, testing how well it integrates with human systems. Daniel watched as she moved confidently around the vessel, checking systems with practiced ease. How many times have you done this? This will be my 7th trip to their city, Emma replied. The first time, I was so terrified I could barely think straight. Now it feels like visiting old friends. As the yacht moved into deeper waters, Daniel found himself studying the woman beside him with new eyes. The Emma he'd known in college had been brilliant and passionate. But this Emma carried herself with a quiet confidence that spoke of experiences beyond anything he could imagine. She'd walked in alien cities, spoken with beings from another evolution, helped negotiate the future of 2 species. I keep waiting to wake up, Daniel admitted as the shoreline disappeared behind them. 3 days ago, my biggest concern was quarterly projections. Emma smiled, her hand finding his. I felt the same way when Dr. Mitchell first showed me the evidence. But Daniel, wait until you see their city. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. Makes everything we've built look like children's toys. As if summoned by their conversation, a figure emerged from the yacht's cabin. Daniel's breath caught as he got his first clear look at Zara. She appeared human at first glance. But there was something ethereal about her movements, a fluid grace that suggested she was more comfortable in water than air. Her skin had a subtle iridescence that shifted in the sunlight, and her dark eyes held depths that seemed to reflect the ocean itself. Daniel Harrison, Zara said, her voice carrying a musical quality that was definitely not human. Told me much about you. I'm honored to meet the person who has captured her heart for so many years. Heat flooded Daniel's cheeks at the directness of the statement, but Emma squeezed his hand reassuringly. Zara doesn't believe in social subterfuge, she explained. Her people value honesty above all else. The feeling is mutual, Daniel replied, surprised by how natural it felt to speak to this alien being. Emma tells me you've been fighting for humanity in your council meetings. Zara's expression grew solemn. My people have watched your species for a very long time. We have seen great beauty and terrible destruction, moments of sublime cooperation and devastating selfishness. The debate over your future has divided us for centuries, and now you need us to prove we're worth saving, Daniel said. Zara corrected gently. Demonstrate the potential Emma insists exists within your species. Many of my people believe humans are inherently violent, incapable of true cooperation. Tonight, you have the opportunity to change their minds. The yacht came to a stop in what seemed like empty ocean, but Daniel could see strange lights pulsing beneath the surface. Emma began checking diving equipment that looked nothing like anything he'd seen before. Sleek suits that seemed to be made of the same shifting material as the device she'd shown him in the planetarium. "We're going underwater?" Daniel asked, trying to keep the nervousness out of his voice. He'd never been particularly comfortable in deep water. "Trust me," Emma said, helping him into one of the suits. "Aquarian technology will keep you safer than any human-made diving gear ever could." As the suit activated, Daniel felt a strange tingling sensation as it bonded with his skin. Suddenly, he could breathe normally despite being underwater. His vision was crystal clear despite the depths. His body moved with an ease that defied every law of physics he understood. But none of that prepared him for his first sight of the Aquarian city. It rose from the ocean floor like a dream made manifest. Spires of living coral, twisted with technology that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. Buildings flowed into each other in organic curves that suggested they'd been grown rather than constructed. Gardens of sea, anemones, and kelp forests were integrated seamlessly into the architecture, creating a living city that breathed with the rhythm of the ocean itself. And everywhere, the Aquarians moved with liquid grace. Their forms adapted to their environment in ways that were both alien and beautiful. Some rode creatures that looked like manta rays with jeweled eyes. Others swam through the water-filled streets with powerful strokes of modified limbs. And still others tended gardens that bloomed with flowers Daniel was certain had never existed on the surface world. "It's impossible," Daniel breathed, his words somehow carrying clearly through the water. "It's what Earth could become," Emma said softly, "if we learned to work with nature instead of against it." Zara led them through the city streets, past markets where Aquarians traded items that glowed with their own inner light, through plazas where children played games that involved manipulating currents of water like sculptors molding clay. Daniel noticed that every Aquarian they passed stopped to observe him with curious but not unfriendly eyes. "They know who I am?" he asked. "News of tonight's meeting has spread throughout the city," Zara explained. "Many are hopeful. They remember stories of the early days when your people and mine first encountered each other. There were attempts at cooperation then, before fear and misunderstanding drove us apart. They arrived at a massive structure in the city's center, clearly some kind of governmental building. Inside, Daniel found himself in an air-filled chamber that reminded him of an ancient amphitheater, with seats arranged in concentric circles. Around a central speaking area, the chamber was already filled with Aquarians, their bioluminescent skin patterns creating a shifting tapestry of light in the dim space. Emma took his hand again as they made their way to the center of the chamber. "Remember," she whispered, "they can sense deception. Speak from your heart, not your head." The next hour was unlike anything Daniel had ever experienced. One by one, members of the Aquarian Council shared their observations of humanity, the destruction of coral reefs, the poisoning of the oceans, the endless wars fought over resources and ideology. Their words were not angry, filled with a sadness that cut deeper than any accusation. But they also spoke of human art and music, of acts of sacrifice and compassion, of the scientists and activists who worked tirelessly to protect the planet. Despite opposition from their own kind, they spoke of individuals like Emma, who had dedicated their lives to building bridges between worlds. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he found himself talking not about technology or business achievements, but about love. About how meeting Emma in college had shown him that connection and understanding were possible between any two beings willing to open their hearts. About how losing her had taught him the cost of pride and fear, and how finding her again had reminded him of humanity's capacity for growth and redemption. "My species is flawed," Daniel said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. But we also learn from those mistakes. We change. We grow. Emma and I are proof of that. The love that brought us back together after 12 years of separation is the same force that drives humans to sacrifice for strangers, to fight for causes greater than themselves, To keep trying, even when failure seemed certain. He looked around. The chamber, meeting the alien eyes that watched him with such intensity. You have the power to end us, to reduce us to a pre-technological state, and let us struggle for survival. But I ask you to consider another path. Work with us. Guide us. Help us become the species you need us to be, the species we have the potential to become. The silence that followed felt eternal. Then, one by one, the Aquarians began to pulse with soft light, their bioluminescent patterns shifting in what Daniel somehow understood was their version of applause. The council leader, an ancient being whose skin held the deep blue-green of ocean depths, rose from her seat. Daniel Harrison, of the Surface Dwellers, you speak of love and growth and potential. These are concepts my people hold sacred. Words are not enough. If humanity is to be given more time, there must be action to support these words. What kind of action? Daniel asked. Partnership, the leader replied. A true joining of our civilizations, sharing of knowledge and resources, working together. To heal the damage done to our shared world, are your people capable of such cooperation? Daniel looked at Emma, seeing in her eyes the same hope and determination that had drawn him to her all those years ago. Around them, the Aquarian Council waited for an answer that would determine the future of both their species. I believe we are, Daniel said finally, and I'm willing to spend the rest of my life proving it. The new beginning 6 months later, Daniel stood on the deck of a research vessel, unlike any ever built by human hands alone. The ship was a masterwork of integrated technology, combining human engineering with Aquarian biotechnology to create something that was greater than the sum of its parts. Solar panels made from a coral-like substance converted sunlight with impossible efficiency, while the hull was lined with living tissue that could heal minor damage and adjust its properties based on sea conditions. More importantly, the ship carried the first joint human-Aquarian research team, scientists from both civilizations working side by side to develop technologies that could reverse decades of environmental damage. Emma emerged from the ship's laboratory, her hair pulled back and her face glowing with excitement. Even after 6 months of working together almost constantly, Daniel still felt his heart skip when she smiled at him like that.
Now, the coral restoration project is exceeding all our projections, she reported, wrapping her arms around his waist.
The hybrid organisms are adapting even better than Czar predicted. At this rate, we could see significant reef recovery within 5 years instead of 50. Daniel pulled her closer, marveling at how natural it felt to hold her again. After their return from the Aquarian city, they'd thrown themselves into the monumental task of building bridges between civilizations, but they'd also carefully rebuilt their own relationship. This time, they were taking nothing for granted, communicating openly about everything from their work to their feelings to their plans for the future. Any word from the surface team? Emma asked. Daniel nodded toward his tablet, where reports from around the world painted a picture of rapid but controlled change. The energy grid integrations are going smoothly. The Aquarian power cells are so much more efficient than anything we had before that most countries are seeing immediate benefits in the medical applications. He shook his head in wonder. Literally healing diseases that have plagued humanity for centuries. It hadn't all been smooth sailing. There had been government officials who viewed the partnership with suspicion, religious leaders who declared the Aquarians demons, and corporations that fought against technologies that made their industries obsolete. But the benefits were too obvious to ignore. Public support had grown as people experienced firsthand how the partnership was improving their lives. Daniel, Emma said softly, there's something I need to tell you. The serious tone in her voice made Daniel's stomach clench with familiar anxiety. After everything they'd been through, he still sometimes feared that happiness this profound couldn't last. The Aquarian Council has made a decision about the next phase of integration, Emma continued. They want to establish a permanent embassy in New York, a place where both species can work together openly, and they've asked us to head the human side of the operation. Daniel felt relief wash over him, followed quickly by excitement. Us, as in both of us. As in the team that proved cooperation between our species was possible, Emma said, her smile returning. As in the two people who have become the poster children for successful human-Aquarian collaboration. Daniel spun her around, both of them laughing as the ocean stretched endlessly around their ship. When he set her down, Emma's expression had grown serious again, but this time her eyes held nothing but love and certainty. "There's something else," she said. "The embassy position would be permanent, as in for the rest of our lives. Ready for that kind of commitment? To the work, to the partnership between our species? To me?" Instead of answering with words, Daniel dropped to one knee right there on the deck, pulling out a ring he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. The ring itself was a collaboration. Human craftsmanship combined with an Aquarian crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. "Emma Sinclair," he said, his voice carrying across the water 12 years ago. "I was too young and too proud to understand what I was losing when I let you go. I won't make that mistake again. Will you marry me? Will you build this new world with me, as partners in every sense of the word?" Emma's answer was barely audible over the sound of the waves, but Daniel heard it clearly. Yes, yes to all of it. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Daniel felt the same sense of rightness he'd experienced that first night in the Aquarian city. This was why the universe had brought them back together, why Emma had disappeared from his life only to return when humanity needed her most, not just for love, though their love was stronger now than it had ever been, but for purpose.